had a friend of mine over the other day. He saw a cutting board that I had available, but my sister-in-law bought it before he could get to it, and he wanted one like it. So my goal is to make him a 20-inch cutting board with mitered edges and a juice screw, and that starts now. Okay, so usually once I get the boards initially cut or ripped, I will check to make sure that they're stable or flat, because if I can get the boards flat now, that when I go through and I individually rip these into smaller pieces, I'm going to turn them up on their side to make this an edge grain board, and then I'm going to put all those smaller pieces together like this. Okay, so if the boards are not flat now, there's going to be more work that I have to do to flatten them individually so that there aren't any creases in between those smaller pieces. Surprisingly enough, both of these pieces are pretty flat. So that means when those end up being ripped down, turned on their sides, and then glued up with a glue bead in the middle of them, they're going to seal really well. So I shouldn't have any problems there. This piece, however, I think is going to end up needing to go on the planer because, as you may have saw, there's a little bit of rocking to it when I lay it flat on the surface. What that's going to end up causing is for these ripped individual pieces to be a little bit thinner, because I'm going to flatten the board down. They're going to be a little bit thinner than the other Padouk pieces. So what I'm going to do with the thinner pieces that these will be, I'm just going to interchange them. It's going to be a thin piece and then a thicker piece that would come from this board. I would always get really concerned when I saw a piece like this kind of drift away from the fence or the gate. If you see down here, it's super flush. You can't really see it, an opening at all. But up here, there's a little bit of a gap. And I mean, that's probably like 1/32 of an inch or something. I mean, it's super small, really unnoticeable when it comes to putting the slats of wood together and, somebody noticing it. A good bead of glue will fill that in. However, sometimes it's a little bit more than that. Sometimes it's a little bit less. I'm actually going to zoom in so you can see the gap here really well. Hopefully that kind of makes it out a little bit better. All right, so you can see up here that there's a pretty significant gap. Whereas Back here, there isn't. So here's the lesson learned for me. One is to keep the pressure in this area right before the saw so that where the initial cut is always the same on every piece of wood. You want to keep your fingers about 3 inches away from the saw blade. Losing digits is not really worth any hobby or business for that matter. Now, regarding the pressure in this area, like I said, if you keep the pressure here, then it will make sure that the initial cut is always the same. Now, when the board gets up here and it starts to kind of drift away from the fence, that's okay. I used to want the wood to stay flush up against the fence the entire way through, and I was getting frustrated because the more and more I tried to do that, the more my pieces would be off. And I just realized it's okay to have a little bit of give up in this area because that's really just releasing the pressure from the blade and the fence, and it's not allowing the wood itself to bind up. So where you want it to be flush is right here, obviously where the saw is cutting, and right there on the fence. If it drifts away from the fence a little bit, don't worry about that. Keep the pressure right here, and your slats of wood or your rip cuts will be as even as possible. Okay, so I've had a little side project going on here, a squirrel moment, if you will, but it's all legit. It's a much needed squirrel moment, I will say. So I had to make these little cornered pieces with these 45-degree angles on the side because when I measure the board from this side ledge, we're sitting at about a quarter of an inch. When I measure the board from this top edge, again, about a quarter of an inch. But when I measure from the corner spots, these corner spots from the board, we're sitting at almost an inch. So I made these 1/4 inch pieces to go in the corners so that we could eliminate there being a difference between where the juice groove is in reference to the side of the board and the top of the board versus the corner of the board. Now, all in all, if I ran the router alongside here, even with the difference, there would still be good uniformity from corner to corner, but in my mind, not necessarily throughout the entire board. It doesn't look good for there to be about a 1/4 inch gap between the edge of the board and the juice groove, and then up here, there effectively being a less than a 1/4 of an inch gap. So since this is further away from the corner of the board, the juice groove would sit closer to the edge of the board. And I didn't want that happening. I'd rather it be a uniform juice groove all the way throughout. Oh my goodness, you guys, it worked. This is awesome. The transition from the top half of the board to the bottom half looks really good. All right, we've got these little settings. There's little settings on the actual router that help you know how far you want to go. So there's this 10 here, and I kind of use the same concept with the juice groove. I went to the line right above 10, and then I said 2 clicks. So you can see those 2 clicks right above that. So 10 and 2 clicks. On the handle groove though, I kept it right above the 10 line. So I know when I flip the board over and I do the other side, I might start a little bit lower just to give a shallow pass for the bit. But by the time I'm done, I'll be back up at the 10 line. Once I get this groove on the other side, that's really it for this board. It really does kind of feel like a journey when you're creating some of these things, because there's so many different steps and so many chances to really mess up. So when it all comes together, it feels really good. Good. Again, it might be hard to pick it up on the camera, but if you look at that, there's no burn in there. Well, everyone, that is it for this video. Thanks for watching. And remember, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. Now go create something amazing.